Here we go. So, in our training module 2, we are talking about the title of the second module is based on the second book from Bert Hellinger, Finding What Mends, or in German, Finden, was hilft. This is where we go into the details of the work of the family constellation and looking at what is actually helping to get the movement going that we need towards healing. And this is the topic of today, tomorrow, and Sunday evening or morning, wherever you are. So here's a little overview. We are looking at the power of words. And these are simply three main words we use. Yes, please, and thank you. These words we use in all kinds of shades and facades, and there will be different ways to say it, but they all have the same meaning. It's either yes, please, or thank you. That's family constellation. Everything else is not family constellation. It could be counseling or role play or however you want to call it, but it is not Bert Hellinger's family constellation, right? He said once he has revolutionized the psychotherapy because he can heal absolutely every mental and emotional problem with either yes, please, or thank you. It's just a matter when it is applied from whom to whom in which order, right? So that's the knowledge that you gain, right? When and how to apply them. So we need also to know the relationship of these words in regards of the orders of love, right? So in part one, which is tonight, we talk about the orders of words in general. We talk about the one word yes and how to apply them. We talk about the three patterns of relationship that we find in family constellations. We will also cover the three dynamics in family systems. And we are going right into the first one, which is called Atonement for My Sins. That is one of three dynamics that you need to know because this is what you work with in facilitating family constellations. Part two, which would be tomorrow, is covering the second word, please. It's covering the second dynamic we are looking on, which is called Rather Me Than You. We are talking tomorrow about the morphogenetic field, and we are also talking about severe and fatal diseases and how to handle them in family constellation. And then the third part, which will be on Sunday, is about the third word, thank you. Then the third dynamic, I follow you. Then we talk about finding what mends, meaning not only words, but we also work with gestures and eye movements and other tools, right? So let's go into part one, the healing power of yes. That's today. We are talking today about acknowledging what is. It is not only the first book of Bert Hellinger, it is also, and not only I said it, a lot of you say that's still the best one because it is so on point and without any, fluff around. It's so on point, and it's not even his book; it's an interview with him. So, and it's available in English for all of you. So this is why it's on the list of the must-have books. Acknowledging what is. You might wonder, oh, it's just this tiny little paperback, and it's so old. What the heck? But you will see, you will love it. That's the one to go. So acknowledging what is not only the title of the book, it's also the most important um, principle that we have to apply in life as in family constellations. And in family constellations in this very specific way, which we will learn today. We are today learning about the orders of words because there is a certain order and the order varies due to the relationships. We talk about the word yes in particular, when to apply it, how to apply it, what is all the facades of this word yes, how can you use other words to convey yes, right? We're talking about the three patterns of relationship. We're talking about the dynamics and family systems, and we are going right into the first dynamic, atonement for my sins. Okay, let's start with acknowledging what is. Acknowledging what is always at the start of a family constellation, and I cannot emphasize that enough. It, you start with something and you have no idea what's going on, right? You have representatives, they say or do something, and it doesn't, it's not like that you all of a sudden have the whole picture or something. Don't expect that, right? So how do you get things moving, right? Simply by allowing the representative to acknowledge what is, meaning to say out loud what is true. Hmm? And this is very, very important. So please, please, please memorize that. This is the start of every family constellation, acknowledging what is. Fundamental for the movement of the souls is to find what is true and to admit it, right? And that is what is acknowledging what is. To find the truth and to admit it. So there's a two-step process. So first of all, through observation, as a facilitator, you need to understand what is going on between two family members. Hmm? And then this is what we call the truth. What is in truth going on in this moment? Not the theory of what you have learned where the orders should be. That is not acknowledging what is, because obviously there is a disconnection or a misorder, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't have a problem. So we have to acknowledge that what is now present. Hmm? And then it is important that this is spoken out loud. This is why words are so powerful. Because even if it is acknowledged secretly, it does not move the souls at all. It needs to be spoken out. And often it is not acknowledged before it's not spoken of, right? So if you suggest to a representative to say a word, let's say yes in this instant, to somebody else in the family constellation, and there's a disconnection and this yes is said, all of a sudden the representative feels a connection and feels that is actually true, right? Which wasn't there before. So the speaking out loud is the key. Having said that, I don't want to confuse you, but I just want to add that there are also silent constellations. So Bert Hellinger has done also silent constellations, which also works, yeah? But this is kind of another realm of work. So I just want to put it in there, just in case you hear of it. This is possible, but that is certainly not your bread and butter family constellation. Yeah. Um, Especially when this word or the sentence you suggest to representative to say is hard to say for him or her, or it sounds harsh or unconventionally, that is okay and often right to the matter as long as it is true. Yeah. So that meaning the representative might feel uncomfortable with saying this, but there is not a resistance because it wouldn't be true. Because we never suggest somebody to say something that is not true. Because it's not acknowledging what is. It is kind of like a psycho game, to try to manipulate representatives or the family members into a certain truth or reality that is not true. And that is not family constellation again, right? It is not a family constellation. So For example, a very good example is that comes up quite often in a family constellation where a mother is facing an aborted child. And obviously, there is a great resistance to say, or often it's a great resistance to say what is true. And what is true, guess what? What shall the mother say to acknowledging what is? Any ideas?
I don't want you.
I don't want you. That's good. It can be even more drastic.
I killed you, or
Yes, Shirley,
yeah.
I killed you. More drastic.
I abandoned you.
That's less drastic. But yes,
I
it's
murdered
true.
you.
I murdered you. Exactly. Right? Now, this can be very shocking, for the representatives to say something like that. But it is true, and it's acknowledging what's true, and they have to say it often when the resistance to connect with the child is the greatest. Yeah. So as greater the resistance is to connect to the child, as more drastic the word has to be. All meaning the same. They're all meaning yes, acknowledging what is yes, it was my action that took your life, right? That's the truth. That's the basic truth. There's nothing to say about it. And it's not about morals, and it's not about if the mother had a chance to decide different. That's nothing with nothing, It's nothing to do with it's just acknowledging the truth. That's what we do in family constellation. And if the mother's already connected and sad with the child, then you don't have to go to such a length. It's okay to say, I abandoned you, or the less drastic ways, I didn't want you, or I couldn't have you, or something like that. But if the mother is resistant to look at the child, then you have to suggest something drastically, like, I murdered you. And although the representative will probably say, oh, I don't think I can say that, then you have to say, is it true or is it not true? Just ask this question. And there's no in between. It's like being pregnant or being not pregnant. It's either true or not. It cannot be a little bit true or a little bit not true, or anything in between. So we have to be always very clear. It's either true or not true. So when the representative says, well, it is true, but I don't want to say it, then you have to say it. You have to say it. If the representative says that's not true, then you have to look at the dynamic. You may don't see the mother there. It's maybe somebody else, right? So this is how you always make sure, by asking the representative, is it true or is it not true, that you actually found the person who is acknowledging the right thing to the right other person. Okay, so that is your most unconventional things that normally is happening in a family constellation, is something to say like, I murdered you. Yeah. But there's of course others, which doesn't come to my mind now, but there are other examples when you use this in the right moment, it will have the healing, it will ignite the healing movement. So as you now see, to acknowledging what is observation is the key. That is your role, to observe the emotional status of a representative and the relationship to another representative. That is the work, observation. And this is why it can be a very quiet work, because to observe is not necessarily, you might not necessarily find what's going on immediately, which is actually likely. So what you need to have time, quiet time, to connect with the morphic field, observe the representative, and then understand what emotional status this representative is in. What beginners typically do and you see this in the practice workshop all the time, they don't take the time to observe. What they typically do is they jump ahead and ask every representative, how do you feel? But the representative not necessarily already feels the depth of the dynamic they are in, right? So this is not a reliable source of information just to know the first feeling of the representatives, right? So better is to take time and observation and come to your own conclusion and then ask the representative. And when the representative concluding or is supporting with what he or she says your observation, then you know that is what you see. If you have an observation and the representative saying something else, then obviously you have to go deeper and ask more or observe longer or something. Yeah. So the words to acknowledge what is are simple words. I did this, I see this, I feel this, right? Very simple. So when you see a representative, you observe a representative, and let's say, because we also learn about gestures, he's clenching a fist, yeah, you will then learn later on that that is a sign for aggression, anger, right? And then the right thing is to suggest to this representative to say to whoever he looks at, I am angry. Simple. Yeah? Don't overcomplicate things. I am angry. That's what you see. That's the observation. And in the moment the representative has to say it, he can say if it's true or not true. He might, if you ask him before you observe, how do you feel? Then they said, oh, I don't know, I have like an itching in my throat, and I don't know. He would say something, right? Well, that doesn't lead you necessarily to anger, right? But if you observe and you see the signs and you suggest, say, I am angry, and he says it, he knows immediately if it's true or not true. And he will most likely say, oh, yes, that's so true. I'm actually really angry. No? And then you know you are on the right track. It's very important. So we have, when we talk about the orders of word, we are focusing on the three words, which Bert Hellinger says are the only words you really ever need in a family constellation, which is yes, thank you, and please, and how they relate to each other, and how do you apply them in different relationships. So the sequence, how you apply the words, depending on the relationship of the representatives that you are working with, in this case, in the family constellation. So then also in the orders of words, we have the so-called sentences of resolution. And we talk about all of this. But now, first of all, let's go through the three basic patterns of relationship. First of all, in the family constellation, we have the mother-father to child relationship. Yeah. So that is, remember, the first order of love. No, the second order of love. Who comes first, right? The parents come first and the child later. So that is it. So the mother and father say to the child, yes, meaning, yes, you are there, you are alive, we are your parents. It's just acknowledging what is. Because remember, the parents don't want anything from the children because they came later, right? So the right order here to say, if you're acknowledging the right order, that doesn't mean that the order is always in place when you do a family constellation, but that means the right order would be that the parents say to the child, yes, unconditionally. Yes, I love you. I love you. How you are, who you are, whatever you do. That's all in the yes. That's all behind the yes. Hmm? Let's say the child does another lifestyle choice as a parent, or the child has a disease or is disabled or whatever. There's still the order is the father and mother say yes to this child. Hmm? The child to the mother and father, however, is a different order, right? The child come later, is a small one. The parents are the big ones, came first. Oh, do you not see that? No. Why is this not coming up? Ah, here we go. So the child to the mother and father says, please first, please to connect with the parents, to be in the right place, please being on the receptive part of things, right? And then after they received whatever they needed to receive from the parents, then they can say thank you. And after the thank you can come a yes. Yes, I love you. Yes, you're my parents. Yes, I'm the child. Yes, I accept what you are doing. Yes, it has nothing to do with me, you know? So that's the right order. Always from the children to the parent, please, thank you, yes. You cannot start with a yes. You cannot start with a thank you. You have to start with a please. And you will see, and you have seen that in workshops, this is the most challenging word to say for a child to the parents. Yeah. Because you rarely see an intact relationship from a child to the parent. What you normally see are interrupted movements. And already here is the please difficult to say for the child. Needs to be said. And funnily, some children, the representatives of children, say, oh, yeah, I can say thank you or yes, but I can't say please. Then you know there is an interrupted movement. So you can't skip that and say, oh, fine, she doesn't need to say please. She can say thank you or yes. No, she has to start with please. Right? Remember, there's no such thing for the parents to the child. There is neither a please nor a thank you. Because either please or thank you are receiving on the receiving side of things, right? The parents are not receiving from their children. They are just acknowledging their love towards their children and the life they gave the children. So then we have the third relationship, which is equal from partner to partner. And that doesn't need to be necessarily a romantic partners, but often it is in a family constellation. But that can be also from siblings towards each other, or in other relationships where the love doesn't flow downwards like the stream, but it's the lake situation, where it's all level. But most often it is partner relationship, most often romantic partner relationship. So here is the order reversed, or not reversed quite, but the first word comes here is yes. And this is already in the relationship that you see in the family constellation because it's disturbed, a hard thing to say. Because fully agreeing to the others, to acknowledging that he is good as he or she is, exactly as they are, unconditionally, with a yes, with an unconditional, not a yes, but I wish you be here more often. A yes, like, exactly how it is. This is the hardest to say. So they might be able to say please or thank you to a partner, but that would be premature to suggest when they cannot say yes. right? And this is why the orders the orders of love, the orders of words depends on which relationship you're working on. Mhm. So let's talk about the sentences of resolution. First of all, it's very important to understand these sentences are coming from the field, from the morphogenetic field. These are not although you're going to learn them, when you apply them, you are not going through your list of words and start at one and say, okay, say this to the ribs and that, and that, and that, and then you have your 20 whatever sentences, and then one of it will work. This is not how it works. You normally have only one shot, maybe two, right? So you have to wait before the energy is kind of completely gone, right? And no movement is possible. So you have to wait again, take your time, hold the space, and wait for the sentence to come from the field. It will be one of the sentences you have learned in one way or the other, but you don't know which one. And then you suggest this sentence, and then it's a question to whom? Who is the one who's saying it to whom? So that's a whole other different story, right? So this is also where you're working on is find the right sentence of resolution for the right relationship. Now we learn all the sentences, and it's again it's the plumber who has a toolbox. Right? These sentences are all in your toolbox for sure. Can't leave any out, right? But imagine you have the plumber comes to your house to fix something, and the first thing he does is to skip out this whole toolbox on the floor, you know, and start with a knife and then a screwdriver and then a whatever, you know, and just try to figure out what tool he needs to fix your. Would you trust this guy? No, you wouldn't. You would be disgusted and you would send him home and you would say, go home, go home. And that's exactly what happens to you as a facilitator, right? You are not just trying to find, like, get in your toolbox and get all the sentences out and suggest all the sentences one after the other and see when you have a hit. Okay. Uh, The sentences don't come from the mind, that meaning they cannot be thought up. And this is why they often sound strange. And that is a great thing. As stranger the sentence sounds, as more assured you can be they come from the field. Strange sounding sentences, they are, for example, have never slang. A slang word is not coming from the field. Field is not versed in slangs, yeah, just to be 100% sure about that. That's coming from the mind. And often when a representative, which happens a lot, a representative starts to talk, which we normally don't want, but you know, sometimes you think, let's see what he has to say, right? And then there come slang words, not bad words, just, you know, not you know, just slang words. Then you can break it up, you know, exactly he's just coming from the mind. There's nothing coming from the field. Yeah, the words that Bert Hellinger used, which were German, they were very strange for German ears, right? So they often sounded old-fashioned. They sounded quite academic, you know. They're often grammatically not correct, and they are spot on, no, to move the soul. So this is a good sign when a sentence like this comes to you in a family constellation, that you suggest the representative to say that. Hmm? Okay. They are short. They are not long explanations. They are short. Hmm? And then you observe the reaction when you suggest a representative say this sentence of resolution. If there is a relief of some sort in the facial expression or in the whole body language, or it is conveyed to you that that they feel good to say it or they feel better to say it now, then you know that was indeed a sentence of resolution. They are always concerned with either reconciliation, which is the flow of love as we call it, or honor and respect. The sentence of resolution cannot be anything else. Yeah. Anything else is again role play, not family constellation. Some say psychodrama or something. There are so many different things going on. It's all fine, but it's not a family constellation, right? So remember, acknowledging what is different to sentences of resolution. Acknowledging what is just to reinstate what you see. That can be anything. That can be any emotion or any kind of relationship you can think of. But then, if you advance in the family constellation and you come to the point where you see the dynamic and what is wrong or what is not in order, then is the time to suggest to the representative to say a sentence of resolution. And that is either reconciliation or honor and respect. There's really nothing else. Which makes it so easy, like if you think about it. These sentences of resolution are very simple. There is nothing difficult. They don't have multiple commas or they're very, very simple. Like a sentence of resolution is, I see you. Or now, hang on. That's so I see you would be acknowledging what it's, but a sentence of resolution would be now I see you. There's a big difference between that. The one thing is acknowledging what is, and the other thing is a relief because a movement has taken place, right? And then the sentence is to say. So the difference between acknowledging what is, somebody who says, now I see you, was not able to look at it before, right? So something has happened in between. So acknowledging what is cannot be the same as the sentence of resolution, because then there was no movement in between. Okay, so they are very simple. They speak directly to the soul, really, or to the heart, right? Not to the mind. They are not explaining anything. They might not even make sense to a spectator, right? This is fine. That does not need to make sense to anybody other than to the soul. They are either true, that means they reflect the energy as it is, or not true. When the sentence of resolution is not true, the representative you're suggesting to say it would not be able to say it, or when they say it, you see a facial expression like this, or something like that. So you see, they are not happy with saying that, right? So then obviously you'll ask, is that true? And then they say, nah, that's not true. Now, in my example, if you would suggest a representative as a sentence of resolution, now I see you, somebody who was before not seen, and the representative says, I don't know. I either he says, I don't see this, I still don't see it, or he says, I have always seen it. So it is not true, right? So then you have to find another sentence of resolution, which is often the opposite. So then you go back to acknowledging what is and say, okay, acknowledge, I don't see you. I can't see you. I can't look at you, right? And that would be igniting then a movement where then you find another sentence of resolution. Yeah. So you always take one step after the other. One is leading to the other. You never have to think anything through to the end. In fact, you never have to think about it anyhow. You always look at the situation, how it is, and then take the next step and then wait. And the next step will reveal itself, right? And so you have your plumber's box and you see what the leak is and you grab into it and you get out a spanner because you want to tighten something, right? And then you wait and then there's still a leaking and then you observe and you see, oh no, the filter is still blocked or whatnot, yeah? Then you take another tool out, undo the filter and clean that. Like this is very, I just want to make it a little bit more drastic. You do have the same work. It's nothing airy-fairy about the work of family constellation, right? I want to convey to you that this is like you learn it and you can follow what you have learned and you don't need to and you should not be intuitive or psychic in this work. This is not what we do, right? So the sentence of resolution as acknowledging what is always depends on the relationship, of course, right? So for example, if you have, like, say, a father-child relationship, the sentence of resolution from the father to the child can be nothing else other than
Yes.
yeah. Yes would be acknowledging what is, or the sentence of resolution is either reconciliation, flow of love.
I love you.
Yes, I love you. Exactly. Or honor and respect would come from the child, right? So when the child has been able to, go to the father, go through the interrupted movement, go to all of this by applying the right order, please, thank you. Yes? Yeah? Then all what is left is, if there's something left, is to honor and respect the father. Hmm? And to show that. Hmm? So, yes. So now yes is very simple, 3 letters, super simple. But there are lots of, sentences that can be used to express yes. And the yes can have, just yes can be extremely efficient and spot on, but also it is also that it's probably not the right thing to say in a certain situation. It is better to say a concrete sentence. Hmm? And there are a couple that are proven to be really helpful. And I go through these with them. They are much more, of course, and once you're experienced in your work, and when I say experience, I talk about years and years of experience, then you find your own word, your own sentences, right? All based on the orders of love and not made up. Hmm? So, and these are all sentences by Hellinger used in German. They are translated, obviously. Yes would also would be, I take this life with everything it entails. That's a yes, right? And it's a very strong yes in certain situations. I take this life even at the cost of yours. Like, think back to the mother with the aborted child. Maybe she has aborted the child because there was a medical risk that she might die giving birth. Yeah? So this yes as a sense of resolution to reconcile with the child would be, I take this life even at the cost of yours. And that would relieve also the child. Often, the right sentence of resolution to say is in a dynamic. When you go way back, generations back, and you find the disturbance of the flow of love between two family members, that one is saying to the other, it's my death and my fate, and I alone carry it. Right? Especially in an entanglement that is very, very strong. By leaving it to me, you are honoring my life and faith. That's a yes. There are also dynamics where you should not apply yes, of course. So as I said, it's not like just throw yes over everything and everything will be fine. That's not how it works. So when would you not say or suggest to anybody to say yes is when a relationship or a movement needs to be acknowledged, then you say yes. When an unbalance or entanglement is still observed, you do not say yes, right? Under no circumstances, because you would go completely astray. You have to see that the unbalance or the entanglement is still there and go ahead, right? So the yes would not clear it at all. There might be a please or a thank you needed, not a yes. So how to apply yes is, first of all, yes stands for acknowledging what is, of course. So it can start, so the family constellation can start always with a yes, right? Because that's just acknowledging what is, and that's easy. You know, nothing can really go wrong with acknowledge. But this yes, so if you suggest to a representative to say just yes to somebody else, that might not do the trick at all. Because yes to what is the question, right? Sometimes it's a great relief and the yes is all that's needed, and sometimes does nothing. And then you need to find a concrete sentence, which is acknowledging what is, like, I am angry. Because the representative needs to connect with this feeling, which is probably blurry, right? And not really present or suppressed or something like that. Then you apply a yes in moving forward. It's a really nice tool to allow a movement that has already started to continue. So for example, there's a representative that took step, let's say perpetrator and victim situation. And there's a representative representing the perpetrator, and the perpetrator started to move towards the victim, which is the right direction, but then stopped somehow. Couldn't, can't go further in the movement. Then you can try to apply the yes to support the movement to continue. Yes, meaning acknowledging what is, meaning in this case, perpetrator saying, yes, I hurt you, or I took your life, or whatever it was. Yeah. And then the movement can continue most of the time. You can also apply the yes to get support of a parent or an ancestor. So that's another way to say, yes, I need support. Beginning of a relationship, as I said before, that's the most important thing, that they have to first actually say the yes. So that's at the beginning of a constellation with a relationship, seeing if the partners that are that are in the constellation are able to say yes to each other, or it's probably just one partner who can say yes and the other not. Then you know already half of the story of this relationship, or 3/3. actually, if not all. So when we're not applying yes is when a child is still in need for love. Yeah, it's still the please. There's nothing else. You can't rush it. You cannot go, okay, let's say the child says 3 times please and then 2 times thank you and then 1 time yes. That's not how it works. Sometimes in a relationship from a child to a parent, it has to say please 100 times, not in one constellation, in 10 constellations, right? Before there's actually the thank you possible. Mm. And even if the thank you was possible, then there's still not the yes possible. Then the please and the thank you has to be repeated all over again. Mm. We are not applying yes when a victim cannot look at the perpetrator, right? So that's very important. A victim who has been hurt by somebody to the extent that it took his life or her life, yeah, has to relate first through to his or her perpetrator before they can say anything, especially yes, which is the strongest, how can I say, uh, that goes against the deepest fear, right, of the victim to say yes to the perpetrator. Although we know from the orders of love that's the only healing way is to do that. Right? And that was why he was so much criticized, because this is not about morals. This is not that a victim, is, how can I say it, like is happy about being a victim or anything like this. It is just what happened, and through the act of taking somebody's life, they are bound forever on an energetic soul level. Yeah. And when we look on a more metaphysical realm, this is all been agreed upon anyhow in a different, realm, sphere. It has been all kind of set out. So, so we have to overcome when we do family constellation morals and social conventions, and this is all okay. That is all existing, but not in a family constellation, right? If we would be bound by these morals or ethics in a family constellation, we cannot help anybody. Yeah. Yes, towards the parents. So how does that go? There are lovely sentences for a child to say yes towards the parent. Remember, after the please and the thank you has been exhausted, so to speak. Yeah. When the yes is actually possible for the child to say, then it is, I honor and respect you as my parents. Or, yes, you are the big one and I am the small one. That's also a yes, because it's just acknowledging what is, right? I honor you and your life journey and soul purpose, because often what is the problem is that the children are disapproving what the parents are doing. Yeah. And that's, as we know, it's not in order. It's not in the orders of love. There is no way for a child to disapprove what the parents are doing. It's just simply not their business. So when they can say, yes, I honor you and your life journey and soul purpose, and what you do is supporting that, then that is a great yes from the child to the parent. What goes on between the two of you, meaning both parents, has nothing to do with me. Often the child is overstepping the role as a child and becoming like a better partner for one of the parents, right? Often a daughter feels she's the better wife for the father, or a son feels he's a better husband for the mother, right? These are the dynamics that are common. Hmm? So when the family constellation has come to a conclusion and some sentences of resolution has been found, and the yes is then finally available to the child, would be what goes on between the two of you has nothing to do with me. Is now the child is in the right place. Hmm? As before, when the family constellation started, the child has condemned one of the parents to not do the right thing. Hmm? I acknowledge the love between you and am not in the place to judge that. That's another yes towards the parents. Because however their love looks like, the child cannot judge it. Let's say that's a very abusive relationship, which is on a social level very sad, of course, and hurtful. Yeah, but on the soul level, the child cannot judge the parents for that. Yeah. The yes towards the parents is without you, I won't exist. That's acknowledging what is yes. Hmm. So the yes, which comes before the please, is the acknowledging what is, right? The yes that comes after the please is a sentence of resolution. So when you have a child looking at the parent and they cannot say please, then you have to start at the beginning acknowledging what is. And what is the basic truth of a child towards the children? They won't exist without the parents. They have created this life. You know, the life of the child would not exist. And often, just by acknowledging this obvious truth, but nobody talks about that. But in a family constellation, through acknowledging this, the movement, the soul, the children's soul can move forward and maybe say please then. Hmm? You gave me life is the same, it just depends on different words or something else that is in line with that. So this is a sentence that come up in your own words. As long as you see that how short the sentences are, right? So that's in the line of that, right? You can say I'm made of your whatever sperm and egg or something like that. Could be it's the same meaning in different words. So from the parents towards the children is I give you my blessings on your way. That's a yes. Or you are free to do whatever you want to do. That's the greatest yes a parent can ever give to their child. To free the child from the expectations of their own lives and allow them to do whatever they want to do. Obviously, when they're adult. No, that's the greatest yes. My love will always be with you. That's a yes that most representatives is available to most representatives. Even if they are not ready to say you are free to do whatever you want to do, then they are free to, then they might feel they can say my love is always with you. That means my love is always with you, probably not my approval, but my love. You know, that's kind of the hidden sentence, like the hidden meaning behind that. I will always look at you with love. It's just another word, another way to say it. And also strong yes. I'm here when you need me. Yes, I'm here. You know. And then, of course, there are other words that you can think of or come up with. And if you, in your studies, if you work with your notebook, it's great if you recap these slides when you see the video recordings that you think and you write down more sentences. Just 2 as a practice for you, right? That are kind of in line with what I've said and what you see as examples here. Okay, so are we ready for an exercise? I have a fun exercise for you. Okay, so here it comes. So I would like you to apply the word yes, and let's just see, we have 5 participants. So one group is 3 members and the other group is 2 members, okay? The duration is 9 minutes. So one of the group, I'm talking about the group of 3 first, and then the group of 2 we are improvising, okay? So in the group of 3, one is the helper, one is the representing a parent, could be either father or mother, and the third one is him or herself in our case, yeah? So I make an example. Let's assume Julie, Mana, and Claudia are in one group, yeah? Then you would, when we do breakout rooms, so then what you would decide, okay, so Julie is the helper, Mana is the parent, and Claudia is the client. So Claudia would ask Mana to represent either father or mother, or Julie would observe Claudia and Mana's relationship and then suggest that Mana is either the father or the mother. Yeah. So that is open. It's up to you. And take your time. Observation is the exercise here. Yeah. It's the observation of the helper. Right? And then when you have decided who is who, so that's when you connect, and then you observe, and then you decide who has to say yes, right? And then ask, is it true? Just to find out if you have captured the dynamic correctly. Because it will only be one who can say yes. Okay? And then you take turns, of course. Then the next one is, so then in our example, Mana would be the helper, Claudia would be the parent, and Julie would be the child. Is this clear? And I would send you a reminder after 3 minutes to swap. Yeah? So the whole exercise is 9 to 10 minutes and everyone has 3 minutes. 3 minutes you think it's very short, but the exercise is to observe and only say one word. You don't need much time to say one word. And then ask if it's true, right? So 3 minutes should be enough.
Maya, sorry, could you explain the 4th point? Ask, is it true? How do we do this?
So let's say you are the helper, Mana, and you would observe Claudia and Julie, and you would decide, or Claudia said, okay, that's my father, right? And then you would observe, and then, you ask them to connect and really, to connect with the field of the family system of Claudia. And Julie would represent one parent. And then you would observe them. And then you would decide at which state is this relationship and who you feel can say yes to the other. Is this the child or is this the parent? Yeah? Okay. And then you say, okay, you say either, that's your decision. The helper's decision is to suggest to either Julie or Claudia to say yes to the other. Okay? And then you say that as suggested. And then Mana, you observe it as a helper in this case. And then you would ask the one you have asked to say yes, is it true is it true? So just to be sure that you have found the right dynamic, the right person, right?
Understood. Thank
Because
you.
then in this example, if Julie would say, I can say it, but it doesn't feel right, then it would have been Claudia. And then actually you can suggest Claudia to say it to her and see if that is true, right? Okay.
Yes.
And
yes.
as always, this is an exercise. Everything can happen. Nobody's judging anybody. You don't need to be right or wrong or anything like this. It's an exercise just to start to, you know, observe and work with what you have learned. Hmm? Okay, so right, so let me stop sharing and then I do breakout. Also, and the group of the two of you, you just have longer, right? So we just expand the time to 4.5 minutes. So what you do is then you would be parents and a child, and you would then be, you decide as child or as a parent for whom you are also observing, right? So you just have to figure that out, you know, in a dialogue between you two, right? So let's make an example. If Claudia and Mana would be in a group of two, then you would say, okay, Claudia says, okay, I'm myself, and Mana, you are my mother. Hmm? And then you said, Claudia, and I'm going to observe this relationship and suggest that I or you say yes. Or Claudia would ask Mana to do that for her, right? So please observe, be also the observer, and you know, suggest who's saying what. So that's up to you. You can decide that. So shall we see how that goes? Okay. All right. I will, how do I do that with this? So we have two breakout rooms, and I think I assign that automatically. There we go. And you just have to click. So I haven't decided who's with whom, and you just have to click accept or something like that. All right. Can you see your rooms? Ah, you're the group of two, eh?
Yes.
Okay, look, we can start sharing if you want to. Yeah. Okay, Julie, you start.
Yeah, that was amazing. Straight away, we both did our mums, and then we got extra time, so I did my dad as well. At first, when I saw my mum, I just wanted to turn away. And so Claudia, picked up on that and did the first step, like she wanted to say yes to me. But then what was the sentence that you used, Claudia, that sort of made a real difference?
I said, first I said yes, and then I love you. And you were like, yeah.
No.
And then I was saying, yes, I respect your choices.
That's right. Yeah. And that made quite a big difference. Yeah.
Wonderful. And then
Yeah.
vice versa, how was that?
Yeah, it was like, Julie was my mom. And so the thing, it was very clear, we both observed that my mom was like, she wanted to quiet and just go away. And it was for me clear that I have to say yes. And I think first I just said yes to her, but there was no reaction. What did I say? Can you remember what I said?
Oh, it was something that made me feel really respected finally. Yes. Oh, I can't remember, Claudia.
What did I say? Yes. I should have written it down.
Yeah, I know, it was good. Yeah, but it was the difference because when I saw her, I just wanted to push her away. But it was like a finally feeling respected by the child, like acknowledged in that respectful way.
But I can't remember what I said.
No, I can't remember.
I should have written it down. Sorry.
Something like you gave me birth or something like that? Was it something like that?
No,
Or
no.
Did I say yes? I respect you. Did I say
Maybe,
something like
maybe
that?
of that,
Yeah.
or honor you or something. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So the simple truth would be to say, yes, you are my mother.
Yeah.
And did you also ask if it was true or not true?
Yeah.
Yes.
And how was it?
The very first thing I said to her, like, just yes, there was just like, nah, that doesn't work. That's not really, it doesn't come across. But when I then said, yes, I respect you, then that felt right.
Mm-hmm.
How was it with you, Julie?
Yeah, it changed the dynamic a lot. Like I was, when Claudia first came a mum, I was sort of backing off, but I felt really hunched. And as soon as she said that, my shoulders went back. I felt tall. I was ready to sort of face her more. Yeah.
Very good. So it's good to see that firsthand, no? How this this simple word changes the dynamics. Beautiful. Okay, the next group is back. So, would you like to share? So we start with Alexandra.
Yeah, hi. Well, it was the first. I was the holding the space for both of them. Mana was herself, and Rocio was her father. And then it took me a while to, because it was kind of an aversion. I felt an aversion between both of them. And at first I got to Mana to say, please first to her father. And she resisted, but she was able to do it. And
Why, please? The exercise was to say yes.
oh, because I felt so much resistance that I just to be honest, I don't know why. I just didn't come to me to ask first say yes, because it was that all that resistance that I felt the need to find the way to approach them as slowly.
Stop right there. So that's a really good example, Alexandra, that you are not a helper and observing, that you're involved. Yeah. So that is a very good example that this has triggered something in your own relationship to your parent, right? Okay. So, and then you forget about everything, and then you feel an urge, right? And that is a really good example, that when you, and that's part of the training course, that you need to resolve your own issues. Otherwise, you cannot help, right? You need to be, you know that.
Yes.
Part of the course is to go through your own dark sides, if you will, and then be clear and open, and then to have, and then stay the observer, and then you feel no urge, you know, to do or help or do or make things, and then you forget about the exercise. So the exercise was to find the one who says yes. So if it's not Mana, then it's Rocio. So the exercise was to see in this relationship between children and parent, who is the one to say yes to the other, not to make the child to go towards the parent, right? Okay. So in this exercise, you would just have to suggest to Rocio say yes instead to Mana to Rocio say yes, right? And then ask if that is true, because Rocio was the father. So did you actually came to this part?
Yes.
Okay, so what was then?
Rocio didn't say yes. So then I came back to Mana, and Mana said yes.
And then what was it true? Did you ask if it's true?
Then Mana said that it was very hard, but she could say yes. She was able to say yes with huge resistance.
Okay, so was it true or not true?
Well, I felt I understood that answer was true.
Okay. Right. Thank you for sharing. Right. Mana, now your turn.
Okay. So as a child, it was difficult, but I flowed with it. It was, I resisted, but I still wanted to say it, so I said it. As an observer, I'm blanking out. I don't remember what happened. I just
I
can't
was
remember.
a child. I was a child.
And
I can
Alessandra
say
was a
that.
parent.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, right?
But I'm completely blank. I don't remember what happened.
Okay,
Well,
maybe somebody else can remind you.
yeah, well, what happened actually, now I got confused.
I
That's
do
interesting.
remember.
Oh, thank you, Rosie.
I could say yes to my dad, but it wasn't true. So it was a yes with reservations, basically.
Yeah.
So I could say yes and thank him for giving me life, and that's true. But yeah, I obviously have some things to resolve with my dad. So.
Mhm.
And as the observer, I think it was Ale was you were you and Mana was the mom, and they were both like quite flowing, and they were both able to say yes to each
Yeah,
other,
yeah.
which actually was beautiful. Was beautiful to see that it's
Mhm.
that energy flows really well between the two of them. So yes.
Cool. And that's also good to see. Oops, now she was gone. Ah, here she is. And that's also good to see that that this is also happening in the constellation. That you are also finding relationships that are in order, right?
Yes.
And that's great. That's great. That's not the whole picture, but then you have a constellation with multiple relationships, and one of them is flowing and in order, and that's also good. It's great to see the difference. Okay. So, any questions you have in regards to what you have observed, or you wondered what that was, or was everything quite clear to you? Did you feel confident in what you were doing? And I'm thinking about the observing, right? The part where you observe. Yeah, for everybody?
I think for me it was hard to
Not very.
actually.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, Rocio, you go
You go,
first.
Rosia, you go.
I think it's actually hard to give them time. It's kind of like you get like, ooh. But it's kind of like, in my case, I just had 1 minute because we were getting kicked out of the thing. So we ran out of time. But yeah, it was interesting.
Yes, and that is you are not alone, Rocio. This is the most challenging part for every trainee, and even the facilitators I know or I heard of are struggling with that. So this, and we have an exercise. When do we do that? I'm not quite sure, but we'll come to that. This, I think it's in part 3, next month. So this ability to be quiet and observe is probably the most difficult one to achieve, or the most difficult to learn, right? So that's great that you realize that even. So there's room for improvement. For sure. Yeah. Everybody has the same problem, definitely, or challenge. Claudia, what was your comment?
I hope I can remember now. I think at the beginning it was like, oh my God, hopefully I get that right. But I think when you're participating in being the observer as well, it's maybe not so easy. But what are you doing? Are you in there or are you observing? I think Judy and I did quite well with it, but I'm not really the judge of that. So I hope we got it right. So yeah.
And what is your question, Claudia?
There was no question.
Okay. All right. So yes. So this is where the exercises are for, so that you feel from your own experience how it is to be like, a facilitator, aka the observer, or the representative, or a client, right? It's all different roles, and they are not equal. They are have different challenges, and yeah, that was part of it. So good. So glad you did it and you got something out of it. So we have now our 10 minutes break, and I see you back in 10 minutes. And please turn your video and your okay, so let's come back to our teaching content? All right. So now we're talking about where we apply and how we apply the word yes in partnerships. So first of all, we talked about that briefly. At the beginning is the yes in a partnership. At the beginning of let's reformulate it. When you have a family constellation, you are not necessarily only work with man and woman in a relationship. Most often, there is a problem in the relationship, and often it's a mother issue. I just say that because that's the dynamic in 90% of the cases, right? So you would work with, let's say, the husband and his mother. And then, let's say there's an interrupted movement towards the mother. This is solved. Then you will see that the husband can turn towards the wife. And now he can say yes, right? Or there was an ex-partner where he still is bound to. So you work with family constellation with him and this ex-partner, and then as a result of this being solved, he can turn around and look at his wife or partner and say yes, right? So just that you get the idea, it is more complex than just having two persons there and they say yes to each other, like, right? So in the constellation, this is um, often the result of a resolution that has taken place already, that then the partner can say yes to the other partner. Of course, you start with these partners facing each other and suggest if they can say yes, and then you will see they can't, or one cannot say yes. And that's when you know with whom you have to work. Hmm? So as an example would be, okay, there is husband and wife, and the wife comes because she's not happy with the relationship. She doesn't feel loved, or she doesn't feel, happy. And then there is a representative for the husband, and the representative of the husband is either not looking at her or looking at her, and you would suggest to say him to say to his partner yes, and they would say, I can't do that. Hmm? And then you know, aha, there's a dynamic that the husband is bound somewhere else, which could be an ancestor, an entanglement, it could be an interrupted movement towards his mother or his father, it could be an ex-partner, lots of, possibilities. So that's your starting point. So you start to work with the representative of the husband and see where the obstacle is that he cannot commit to his partner. However, having said that, I want to remind you that we are not looking for a specific outcome. So it is not that this constellation needs to end with a yes towards his partner, right? It can also be that the partnership is over. But you would have a clearer picture when you have worked with his husband. And if he cannot say yes to the partner, then he can say thank you, which would indicate that the relationship is over. Or he can say please, which would indicate the relationship has not even begun, beside the fact they're already married. So this is how you, with the three words, yes, thank you, and please, can suss out practically every dynamic and the state of a relationship. So if the yes in a partnership is at the beginning, that it means now I'm free to be with you. Now our relationship, from my perspective, can start because I say yes to you as a partner. And that doesn't mean that they are not together forever or they just newly met. That's time has no relevance in this, right? Yes, in a relationship can also say, I see you and your love for me. That's a yes that is acknowledging the other partner and their state of emotions, but that are not theirs, right? It does not necessarily be the same for both. So you have always to find at the beginning of a constellation that what you can acknowledge, that what the representative can acknowledge as true. So for example, when you suggest to say just yes, then you don't know, is it yes, I'm free, or is it yes, I see you and your love, right? So this is also tricky. So only to use a yes is not much of help for you. So to be more specific gives you better indications at which state this relationship is at. Yeah. And this is why we cannot, although Bert Hellinger said you can only use yes, thank you, and please, this is more, on a metaphysical level. You do need your sentences to find out where exactly the relationship is at. I'm now fully available for you. It's the same as I'm now free to be with you. It's just slightly differently expressed. And different, this is why I want you to learn a lot of sentences which can have the same meaning because one resonates better than the other with the representative, yeah? So it's not like one fits all here. So at the end of a partnership, the yes would be my love will stay even if I have to leave. So that's a yes, acknowledging that their relationship was built on love, but it's not gonna last. Yeah? That's another possible outcome of a formula constellation that is healing, right? We are not like of creating here a Hollywood movie where there must be a certain ending. Especially not the ending that the client wants you to create because you're not a director of a movie here, right? But the ending can be in a good place to realize for the client it is over, to be free to move on. And quite frankly, if you have a partner coming with a relationship issue, chances that it's already over are high. Yeah. So don't think, yeah, we can fix that. No, we cannot fix it. We don't want to fix it. Yeah. I love you, and that what is guiding us is also a yes at the end of a relationship. Because, and we will talk about that when we talk about destiny relationships, right? Partners are often together because they fulfill a certain purpose, this relationship, on a soul level, right? And when this purpose has been done, is over, then the partners normally or often cannot stay together. And this needs to be acknowledged, even if nobody knows what the deal was. And that's also not necessary to find out. Sometimes, sometimes you can refer somebody who really wants to know to Akashic record readings or something like that to find that out. But in the family constellation, that's not what we do. We don't need to find that out. Yes, Julie.
Maya, would that be like karmic? I know in module 1 we sort of skipped over karmic, but would that be the karmic relationship?
Yeah, can be
What you're saying
karmic,
here?
karmic referring to previous lives. It can also be
Yeah.
a soul contract.
Okay.
Yeah. But not necessarily to do with a former life, but with a soul contract that has been made on a soul level before birth, before, you know, before the partners came to the physical realm, that has been decided, they've decided that they are going in the relationship, performing a certain task, and then go out of it to move on to do something else. Mm-hmm.
Would it be also to heal the family lineage, so to speak, or what you're coming to family constellations for?
Yes, so
Yes.
it can heal if it is a pattern in the family system. It will also heal if you go back to the root cause of it. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yes.
we always have to think in family constellation two ways. There's always two ways. Always. It could be a direct experience of the client and a direct trauma, or it could be an entanglement in the family system. And the client is just repeating it. Or not even the client, even when we are working for in the third generation, there could be the cause of this dynamic in the fifth generation, because the third generation is repeating it, and then the client is repeating it. So you always have to think it's either, let's talk about traumas, it's either an own trauma of the client, or he is entangled with somebody who had the trauma. And then actually there's a third possibility. And then the one, if he's entangled with somebody who had the trauma, he could also be repeating it, right? So the healing, as you're referring to, Julie, is only taking place if you find the source of it. Meaning you go back all the generations where it's originated. Yeah. So let's come back to this example with the couple. If they heal their relationship, if they work on their relationship, and that is cleared, but the source of their problems was not a soul contract, but was a family dynamic, their children can repeat the same. It's not cleared in the family system. It's only cleared between these two. Meaning that the descendants can still pick it up. And that is the difference between family constellation and pretty much every other healing modality. Right? Pretty much every healing modality I'm aware of stops at the relationship. When the energy in the relationship is cleared, they stop. They think that's accomplished. Which it is, but not for the next generation. If it was a family dynamic, right? And how we find out if it's a family dynamic or an own trauma, then we go through that. I think it's in module 3 to know exactly what to do to find out. Is that clear? Please raise your hand if something is kind of not clear, because I don't want to skip. These are very important rules and principles of family constellation. Yeah. And I can't repeat it often enough. So I'm happy to repeat it over and over again until it is really clear for you that that's what we do. You always have a place in my heart is also a yes in a relationship that has ended. No, it's not as strong as my love will stay. So you will see that it's too strong for some relationships to say that. Because in fact, they don't feel that they're actually separating if they still feel the love, right? And that's to be respected. So then you would suggest you'll always have a place in my heart. It's not as strong as my love will stay. Or, and then If they have children, then what can be said at the end of a relationship, if there are children present, through our children, we always be connected. Yeah, because that is the truth, and that's acknowledging what is, and that is how you honor and respect your partner as a parent of your children. Hmm? Because it's not necessary that there is still love in the or there is still a heart connection. It is not necessary in relationships. They can be completely separated. Yeah. You see that in the dynamic if there is a need or an urge to still be connected on a heart level or not. Yeah. And when there is not a need or an urge to be still connected on a heart level, that's okay. It's not a prerequisite for, for a relationship that has ended. But it needs to be acknowledged that there is still a connection when there are children, obviously. So it cannot be denied. Like, okay, so uh, how can I say it? It's a kind of a Solomon with his sword, yeah. Like so this is I take the daughter and you take the son, and we are, divided. We are not connected anymore. That's obviously not true, right? So this is a connection that is normally enabled for every parent when they leave the relationship. So now we look at the yes in the relationship to others. For example, the ancestors. Well, not to others in general, to everyone from the first order of love who belongs to the family system, right? So the yes in the relationship to the ancestor, there's only one way to say yes to the ancestors. I honor you, right? Honor and respect, because reconciliation with an ancestor from the perspective of somebody who came later is not possible. So there's only honor and respect. So saying, I'll honor you and your death, I give you a place in my heart. That's all, honor and respect. Yes, sentences of resolution in the relationship to ancestors. The relationship to God. So you would ask, whoa, am I dealing with God in the family constellation? Yes, sometimes God shows up in the form of a representative. Hmm? Now, if you put aside all the religions that you know of, that you might practice even, in a family constellation, there is no place for that, right? You cannot really help if you have a strong, you can have your belief, of course, but not when you're facilitating a family constellation. You have to put it aside, yeah, and accept that there is no God other than the divinity in oneself. So if God shows up in a constellation, then it suggests strongly that one of the representatives is very religious. Yeah. So obviously you have to deal with that, but not in the way that you are now facilitating a religion. You cannot facilitate a religion, right? In any way, shape, or form. So the yes to God would be, I am you and you are me, or now I see you in me. That would be the sentence of resolution, for the one who is in need of God. God can also be, of course, a parent or something, right? But often, so in a constellation, especially, I just remember like the physical constellations when we had a room. If somebody feels so big they want to stand on a chair, something like that, then that's a good indication. Rusty remembers that, yeah? So that's a good indication that this is mighty representative for a religious God, right? So what else? To a victim. Yes, to a victim is, now I see your pain. Because obviously a victim is in pain, either physical or emotionally. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a victim. It's kind of the part of the definition of a victim, yeah, that they are in pain or agony or distress or anxiety or whatever, but let's call it pain, right? So the yes in relation to a victim would be, now I see you. The perpetrator would be able to say to the victim, now I see your pain. Right? And that's a big step for the perpetrator. Because if the perpetrator would have seen the pain in the act, he or she wouldn't have done it. You know, giving it's not a sociopath or psychopath. And then vice versa, the yes in a relationship to a perpetrator, meaning coming from a victim to a perpetrator, is you belong to me, I belong to you, we are the same. Because through the act to the action that has been done, they are bound together. And that's just the fact in the orders of love. Nothing we wished for or nothing it's just as it is. You see that by the relief of both parties when they are allowed to express that in form of the representative. That is the healing movement towards each other. And that was where Bert Hellinger um, was highly outcast in the beginning when he was starting a family constellation, because he saw that dynamic in his workshops when he was working, I think he did supervisions with other psychotherapists, and then he saw this is how he developed family constellation, and he saw this dynamic opposite to social belief that actually victim and perpetrator belong together and on a soul level. And so when he was suggesting that they express that to allow the healing movement to take place, then he has been quoted in in papers and in some articles, and that is not right, and the poor victim and the bad perpetrator, and how could you say something like that, and he would shame all the victims. Why would they go to the perpetrator? They because they couldn't decide, they couldn't decipher between the soul level, and social and legal rules, right? That it's not the same. But this is now all. He had a lot of work and a lot of enemies to overcome in his 40 years of work. But for us now, we can work with it, and it won't be an issue anymore. So remember, we not only have the victim-perpetrator relationship, we also have the advantage and disadvantage giver relationship, right? That is when it's not about life and death, but it's about often material things that are as important as anything, like for survival. That's the advantage and disadvantage giver. It's not somebody, does a favor for us. That doesn't have an imprint on the soul. It has an imprint on the soul, and therefore on this family soul and the family system. If somebody is robbed of his, all his belongings, his house, his land, his income, his everything, right? So changes the course of the life of somebody without balancing it out. Yeah, without giving anything for it. And very typical, and you can imagine how often we have this in Germany, is after the Second World War, or during the second, or before even, when the Nazis have just taken the properties and the businesses and everything from Jewish people, and without giving them anything, throw them into the concentration camps and just took all their belongings and gave it to others who could then build a living out of it. And then in 3 generations, you have a client, 20 years old, suffering from, I don't know, 30 years old, suffering from a severe disease or an addiction, or is not able to make a career despite the fact it's very clever, all of these. And then in the family constellation, it comes to the point 3 generations back, nobody knew that his family has been given unjust the fortune of a Jewish person, of a Jewish family. Yeah. And this is then how they suffer now without knowing it. So when with reconciliation in a family constellation, in this case, from advantage and disadvantage giver, you can help these client to heal the family wound. Hmm? And the right sentence to say, or the right word to say yes, or the meaning of yes between the advantage and disadvantage giver is, so to an advantage giver, I'm honoring my debt to you. So that would be, that would be in my case, then the Nazis, the client's family who has been, given the fortune from a Jewish person and built a living, they would have to say, I'm honoring my debt to you because they are still the debt pay, right? It's not done. It's still there, still unbalanced. And then on the other side, the disadvantage giver would say, now I see your desperation. Right? Because the person who loses everything without getting anything for it is in desperation. They don't die. Otherwise, we would have a perpetrator and victim, right? Relationship. They still live, but much lesser than they could live because everything has been taken from them, right? So that is then the right word to say is desperation or something similar, right? Maybe even pain. You have to you be guided in a constellation to say the right word. It could be also be pain, like a victim. It could be painful. Okay. So this was the word yes, and it was a lot of information. I'm aware of that. So let it just sink in. Repeat in 2 weeks or so the videos, and and let it all come together. Okay, so now we don't think about that anymore. We are now going in another topic, which is the dynamics in family systems. And as always, it is quite simple. We never need to know more than 3. We can all count to 1 to 3. So we have 3 words to learn. Yes, thank you, and please. Right? We have 3 dynamics to know about, and that's what I'm talking about now. Belonging, conscience, and guilt and destiny, forming 3 basic dynamics in a family system. The one is what we're talking about now, atonement for my sins. And that's connected to the word yes. The next one tomorrow is the second dynamic, rather me than you. And that's, paired with the word please. And then in the third, on Sunday, in the third part, we are talking about the third dynamic in a family system, I follow you, which is paired with the word thank you. And these are standard dynamic descriptions. You don't need to learn another word for it. You just use it as is, right? These are so when I ask you later on in a practice workshop, what dynamic do you see? There's only the choice between the 3. It's really simple. You don't need to think hard or made it up. You need to observe and say, which one of the 3 is it? And of course, to make it more complex, they can be in all kinds of combinations through the generations. Right. So you need always focus on, okay, between 2 people or 3. If it's an entanglement, there's 1 dynamic. But then in the constellation, there could be more than 1 dynamic, right? And additional to this dynamics is the interrupted movement to the mother or the father, which is not a dynamic as such. We might call it like this, but it's not. It's a trauma. That's a trauma, really. Because it's the own trauma of the client. The client has experienced in his or her lifetime an event when she was young, even before she was born, that has traumatized her or him. We talk about that in module 4 in detail. That's a trauma. This trauma can be repetitive in a family. And this is why we call it dynamic, but that's not what I mean here. The dynamics in family systems are entanglements, always 3 persons, yeah? And often the client is one of them, and then there are 2 others. Okay, so this sounds a bit theoretically, so let's go more in the practice and we look at the first dynamic, atonement for my sins. So all of these dynamics are a breach of the orders of love and will come up in a family constellation if it's not an interrupted movement, right? That's to be expected. So atonement for my sins. So and that's obviously a translation from the German, right? And then we have to think about like every word of it. Did I spell that right? Atone, yeah. Um, then we have to think about exactly what it is and how we actually see it and what we do to solve it. So, first of all, remember the first orders of love, belonging, conscience, and guilt. Now, atonement for my sins is a violation of the first order. Hmm? Why is that? It has to do especially with guilt. Yeah? Remember, the feeling of guilt is only artificially induced through conditioning, conditioned belief as a child, and is not absolute. There is no such thing as guilt other than in relationship to the belief systems of the upbringing of a person. Mhm. So what is somebody feels guilt for one thing in another family system, they don't feel guilt at all for that. Yeah, just be aware. This is why when we talk about guilt, it's an artificial construct. It's a mind construct. It's not real, right? This is why sins are not real, because sins are based on guilt, right? And that is the violation of the first order. Following something that is not part of the family system. No? So you step out of the family system and you're violating because you're taking over somebody else's guilt. You being the client, right? Which is not your doing. Yeah. Or if it is your doing and it is not an entanglement, you are not acknowledging that there are no such thing as sins because there is no such thing as guilt, right? So it has a strong dynamic and we will look at it now. First of all, we talked about what are sins. And it's really great if you're up to that and if you like philosophy and if you like, to self-study and deepen your knowledge about things. These are all things that are like a whole doctorate in itself. So if you want to really look into what is guilt, what is ego, right? That is a lifetime of study and self-observation to find that out. Obviously, we are just, looking at a very small chapter here of it, and it's brief and it's very, very general. It's more general. But recap, guilt and ego. Guilt is bound to ego, right? Without an ego, there is no feeling of guilt. That's simple. Now, the ego is a mind construct. The soul itself is not the ego, right? It's a mind construct. So, guilt is a mind construct. That is something you need to really understand. Hmm? And then later on, when we look at the frequencies of emotions in module 4, you will see that guilt has such a low frequency, that is below the frequency where life can exist. And that's also a good indication that it's not real, right? But it is such a strong mind concept or mind construct or a meme, as it's called scientific, that it becomes real. So we have to deal with it. Okay. So the healing word of somebody who feels laden by guilt, yeah, which is a sin, so to speak, is what we're looking at. What is the healing movement? And so let's get into that. So this dynamic, atonement for my sin, is leading to diseases, accidents, suicides, and death, all in the attempt to atone for something called a sin. Of course, unconsciously, right? The client is not aware of that at all. The client would say something like that, oh, I'm always thinking of suicide, or I have attempted several suicides, or they have a severe disease, maybe even born with it, right? Or they are always involved in accidents, like they had already 5 car accidents or something like that. That is a strong indicator, and just an indicator, but a strong one, that the dynamic atonement for sins is here, what you see. Now, you always have to look twofold. Is it a guilt the client feels for own actions, or is it the guilt the client feels because of an entanglement with somebody from the family system who feels guilt for their action? So as always, we have to inquire both lines. So what it is if it's an entanglement, a deep, deep love to the entangled person who has caused the death of another person, which was felt as guilt, and now the client who is entangled feels it as its own guilt. And here it's great to work with representatives, because you can ask the representative, once you observe that you might have to deal with this dynamic, you can ask the representative, does it feel like your own guilt or somebody else? They will know. When they ask, they will know that. And they might say, it does actually feels like somebody else's. And then this is a strong indicator that you have an entanglement to deal with. Atonement is so the atonement they are seeking is subconsciously to harm themselves, right? That they think they get relief from it. Obviously they don't. Yeah. But that's what they think. So that's where that comes from. But what is the really healing movement is to look at the dead. It's always related to somebody who died tragically. To look at the dead and release his or her destiny with love, right? To see that nobody's fault, nobody's guilt. Maybe somebody's responsible, the one who had the knife and stabbed is responsible, but not guilty. That's the difference, right? Because the hand that is on a soul level, yeah, the hand that is kind of forcing the knife, I say it, into somebody else's heart is also called the hand of God, right? On a soul level, it's a destiny. Yeah. This victim perpetrator situation is mutual or equal on a higher level, higher than the physical level, higher than the social level, right? So the perpetrator nor the victim is guilty of everything. And this is the healing movement. And this is why when victim and perpetrator come together with love, then they are released. And everybody else who's entangled with them. Now, if you have your client who's self-harming or always in these accidents or, or feels so guilty all their life for everything that happens in their family or in their workplace, or where they always feel guilt, yeah? If this client through your guidance in a family constellation, is able to perceive the real victim and perpetrator finding together with no need for atonement, because the guilt is taken out of there, then they are relieved from their own feeling of guilt. And that's the magic of a family constellation. So whenever in a family constellation, the word guilt comes up, or the feeling of guilt, always remember, chances are it's the first dynamic that we're looking at, atonement for my sins. And the healing movement is acknowledging there is no guilt. That is the yes, the relation to the yes. But it is not enough that the client, just a sec, it's not enough that the client acknowledge it. First of all, victim and perpetrator have to acknowledge that. If the guilt is depending on the guilt feeling of either the perpetrator or the victim. Okay, Rocio, you go.
I was just laughing because I just understood my very first constellation, that it was about me feeling guilt, and I never understood what was going on. So,
really? Oh, do you still
yeah.
remember? Well, I certainly don't remember. You want to share that? If you
Yes, I
remember?
remember that I sat down. I was feeling so guilty during the weekend that I didn't want to constellate. For some reason, I was feeling guilty for like actually taking my place. So I actually sat down, and it took a lot of time for me to actually sit down in the chair. I was the last one. And I said, I feel guilty all the time. And I even feel guilty of sitting in this chair and taking my place. And I remember, I'm not sure what it was, but it was, I remember like the person who was doing me was like facing someone with green eyes. And there were like two things pushing that thing. So I never understood exactly what it was, but definitely I think that it was related to a disease. And then my mom came in, my mom came in to help me get away from that entanglement. So yeah, it's funny, how you understand something after 2 years.
Yeah, fantastic. That's great you still remember. And it's also great to see that for all of us, for the healing movement, you do not need to understand what's going on. Yeah. Only as a trainee and as a facilitator, you need to understand what's going on. And not even always you need to understand it. But this is the point, you are not obliged, and you should never try to explain to the client or the workshop participants the dynamics that you see, because they wouldn't be able to understand it, because they need a course of 200 hours to understand it, right? And secondly, it doesn't help the movement at all. The movement takes place regardless. Thank you, Rocio, for sharing that. 20 years ago, you said, was it? You must have been very young. 2 years, I was just wondering. Okay. So, how do we finding the real victim perpetrator and let them face each other, releasing the entangled person from their duty, is here the healing movement. Yeah. And what then is happening, and we will all talk about that very often, and I will repeat it as often as it comes up, so it really starts to sink in, is you see that the entanglement is over when the person, the client, or whoever is representing the client, is okay with turning away from it and feels a relief being able to turn away and walk away. Because as long as they entangle, they cannot do it. So this is why you can never force a healing. A healing is a natural process, right? The process of the movements of the souls. So just to see, oh gosh, this person is in distress, looking at, two others who have a dynamic going on, let's say victim perpetrator, and they say, just turn around and everything is fine. That's not how it works, obviously, right? You have to allow the movement to come to an end, the client to observe it, and then when this has come into the right order, whatever dynamic it was, then as a result of it, the client can turn away and feels the relief, right? That's what you are looking for. We talked about sins before. So it's a feeling of personal guilt, which we now know has no objectivity to it, right? The emotion is coming from an ancestor if it's a entanglement, and the can be combined with a rather me than you, rather me than you dynamic, right? So that's, we don't go into, that's too complex for today, but just bear that in mind. That's normally in a family constellation, you have multiple dynamics going on. So what is denied? We're always looking for the one who's missing, the one who's not acknowledged, the one who hasn't had a place in the family system, the one that is denied its rightful place, right? That's always what is missing in the family constellation. That is what's causing the blockage in the stream of love, the rock that needs to take out so the flow of love, the love can flow again, right? So in the dynamic atonement for my sins, what is denied? The relationship with the victim is denied. You know, the victim is outcast. You know, the guilt feels so heavy that it is impossible for the perpetrator to look at the victim. So the victim is cast out and kind of pressed out of the family system, although we know from the first orders of love, the victim is part of the family system. So the healing movement is here to bring the victim in, acknowledge the victim, acknowledge the dynamic and the relationship between victim and perpetrator, allowing them to come together in a natural movement of the souls, and then the entangled client or person is free. Yeah. What needs to be acknowledged is the sin is forming a lasting relationship. Yeah. So eye contact and acknowledgement is important, not looking away. It is also good to balance out the unjust, if you will, for casting out the victim, to do something good, to honor the victim, right? So sometimes the healing movement is either for the perpetrator or the entangled person, right? To just honor the victim or give them, you know, a place in the heart, or said, you belong to us, we will never forget, we will never forget you anymore. All these kind of acknowledgements are what is healing, to bring the victim in and allow them to be part of the family system. That is all in the family constellation. You do not need to suggest to your client to go and ask your family members where the victim could have been, in which generation, and if they had a name. And this is not what we do. No, this is not what we only working on the soul level in a family constellation. We are not going in out in real life, if you will, and do stuff. We allow the movement of the souls to follow up in their own terms, and they will. Of course, sometimes I had that. I just remember a participant from a workshop. There was, I don't know exactly what it was, but there was something with the grandmother going on. The grandmother had something, maybe a missing child or something that the family didn't know about, and in the family constellation this came up. And my client, she actually, no, coincidentally, and you know, there is no coincidence, she actually went to visit her grandmother the next week for her 90th birthday or something like that. So fresh after this constellation, she actually asked her grandmother about it. She visited, you know, and the grandmother acknowledged it, that that was the case. So I think it had to do with a child that she has either aborted or stillborn or something. Nobody talked about. So Having said that, it can happen that the client goes out and talks about it or does some research in the real world. I'm just saying that's okay. I'm just saying it's not necessary. Yeah. So if you have a client, you're working with a client, you don't have to suggest to do anything, yeah, after the constellation. It's done and dusted, so to speak, when the constellation is over. What else do I have here? This doing for the victim is acknowledging its rightful place in the family, and as opposed to the disorder is trying to pay reparations for a supposedly sin of an ancestor with a disease or with living alone or being unsuccessful or being in accidents all the time, right? So that is the replacement for it. Okay, what more do we have? So what are the examples for a dynamic atonement for my sins? Well, most often as it's this abortion, right? Mothers aborting children. It is so common and it's so socially accepted. And of course, there are good reasons for that. That's not the point, right? But on the soul level, mother and child are suffering. Because normally it's not dealt with to the extent that the life of this little soul is acknowledged as being part of the family system. A war situation, of course, it's very often where this dynamic comes up, and of course in Germany there was lots of it in two world wars. This dynamic. A crime, obviously, as one of the scenario. Also an accident. It does not, so this taking the life of somebody else does not necessarily need to be by, what's the right word here? What am I saying? Like something that has been planned. It can be an accident that just happens, but still the person, like say a car accident, yeah? Let's say somebody drives over a young child and it dies, right? And then this driver feels horribly guilty, right? Horribly guilty. And that could be also the ignition of a dynamic in the family system, you know, because this guilt is never acknowledged. This never talked about. He would probably never say a word to anybody. You know, this is all not. And then this child who was a victim died is not part of the family system, not acknowledged, right? So what heals in the dynamic of atonement for my sin is dedication, devotion, and commitment instead of looking away and feeling guilty and wanting to, you know, harm themselves to atone for the sins. This is all the wrong direction because it's away from the victim and kind of towards themselves. This is why it's so egoistical. To feel guilt or sin is an egoistic movement. It takes away the love for the victim and victimize oneself, basically, right? So this is the fine, this is the, how can I say, the fine print behind this this dynamic is what's really said there is, I do not acknowledge the victim as the one who is really, you know, the one who needs my love or my attention. I turn it towards myself, make myself a victim, but that doesn't help the victim, right? You know, so Um, so this is why the feeling of, oops, why is it gone? Hang on. The feeling of guilt is a substitute to avoid going through the pain, taking over responsibility, then acknowledging that it is a destiny, and then doing what's needed is acknowledging it, and then giving the victim a right place. That's what needed. And the feeling of guilt, and then this, transforming it into a sin, into a meme, into an own entity, takes all of that, what is needed to be done, away from it. But thank goodness the family soul will not forget it, will always keep it, and will suss out a descendant who has the most love for this victim as being part of the family system, to look at it to an extent that they harm themselves. Hmm. Okay, so we have 20 minutes left and we have an exercise. And this time it's a guided meditation, and I will guide it. And we are going through the emotion of guilt. Yeah? So I would like you to sit upright, and I probably can, let's see, I think there's nothing else coming. No, I'm gonna stop sharing. Put that away. You make yourself comfortable. Put your notebook away, your pen, everything else, nothing to write down anymore. And then find a good seat with an upright spine where you are unsupported. Relax the shoulders, relax the jaw, and close eyes. And start to deeply breathe into your belly. Take a deep inhale through the nose. Feel how your belly expands. And then exhale, draw the belly in. Long and deep breath until your exhale is complete. And then inhale again, deep into your belly. And continue with this deep belly breath a few more times. And while you do it, you let go of the thoughts of the day. Let go of any forms of excitement or worries. And you allow yourself to let go any conceptions, beliefs, and you allow yourself to be in the now, in this moment, here and now, where everything is good as it is. Everything is in divine order. You're at the right place at the right time. You're exactly there where the soul wants you to be. And you continue deep breathing and enter your happy space, which could be indoors or outdoors. A space where you feel safe, where you are in control, where you can let go of everything. And in this happy space, you are seeing yourself. It could be in this lifetime or in another, could be at any age. Whatever comes first, you go with it without thinking about it. Whatever picture of yourself comes up, you take it, accept it, acknowledge it. That's the right one. And it is a situation where you see yourself in that had caused you to feel guilty. It might be a recent occurrence or a very long ago one, something that comes up you never thought of. And you in your happy space as an observer of your other self. You feel nothing. You are observing the other self. You're looking at yourself like a doctor looking at the patient, or a scientist looking through a microscope at a bacteria. You just observe yourself, riddled by this feeling of guilt and the situation that you can clearly see that has caused this feeling of guilt. And you take note of every movement, every gesture, everything. Nothing escapes your awareness. You see the whole picture. And you observe the agony that your other self is in. And you can clearly see why it is. The situation is clear in front of your eyes. You know exactly what time of the day or night it is, where it happens in a room or outdoors, happens in this country or another, age, who was involved. And you feel this deep love for yourself, going through this emotion of guilt, knowing that she cannot possibly has done anything wrong. And then you go to her and you say to her, "You are born a beloved child of the universe. You have done nothing wrong. You cannot possibly do anything wrong. And I love you as you are." And you take yourself in your arms and you hold yourself very tight, close to your heart. And you say again, "I love you as you are." And then you overlook the scene you found yourself in and whoever is involved. And you say to whoever is involved, "I see you and I love you too." You all belong to us. We are all part of a divine game or play. Here to play our role. And we all play it well. And thank you for that, playing your part. And I honor and I respect everything you gave for it. And then you take your other self into your heart, so she melts with you. You become one. And you step a little bit back so you can overlook everybody else who's involved. And from the bottom of your heart, you say, yes. And then you turn around while everybody else is leaving your happy space and leaving nothing behind. They go where they came from. And you also leave your happy space and come back into your room where you feel the weight of your body on your chair and you feel relaxed. And in your own time, you open your eyes. Okay, so how about everybody unmutes and then we're checking in with each other. If you want to share something, coming to the end of today's part. Anything from the meditation maybe, or something else, whatever comes to mind.
For me, being in the training today has been a bit hard because I'm going through a breakup at the moment, but it was hard for moments. But actually the meditation like helped me actually release a lot of the guilt that I've been feeling that I did something wrong. And it's just to accept what it is. So yeah, it's been good. And it also understanding all of the dynamics and all that stuff gives me more clarity. So
But that's wonderful, Rocio. I'm so glad you got that out of it.
The meditation was very powerful for me. I saw myself as a child. It was completely unexpected what came up. My parents had a very big argument with our neighbors way back then. And at that time, we didn't have a television set at home. Our neighbors used to have one. When I was a child, I didn't know about this fight. And I used to go to the neighbors to watch television. So unaware of the fight, I'd gone over to their house that, oh, it's just a normal day. I'm here to see TV. And my father got extremely wild and upset that how dare you go there? And he literally dragged me back. That guilt came up for me. And I realized after that, I have always ever put other people before me. And when I said yes to everyone there, the feeling I got was, yes, I am important. That's the line that followed. So it was very powerful. Thank you.
That's wonderful, Mana. Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
What actually comes in my mind was, you know, when we talked about dynamics and also victim perpetrator, lately I've been thinking, how about those people who actually kill, like serial killers? Does that the same stuff apply, or is that bigger or approached differently, or?
So, as always, I cannot reply on theories, but I can share what I have seen.
Okay.
So I have seen constellations with lots of dead people. I cannot use the term serial killer, but it could, you know, it either a war
Yeah.
situation or an accident with lots of dead people, or you know, things like that. What is different to a normal victim perpetrator relationship where you have only one victim is
Mhm.
that the perpetrator feels normally very superior. So there is like the representative for the perpetrator is kind of giving the impression that what he or she has done is completely okay, in
Mhm.
order, and they really felt the call to do it, you know. So it's like being in service, you know, again, God's hand to put their own lives um, with everything it entails, with all the guilt that's then, you know, suppressed and everything like that, and also the social responsibility for their actions. Um, they feel big normally in a constellation, and they feel they had a big task and they have fulfilled it, and they are kind of um, proud of it, right? That's what you normally see. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
Thank you.
And there's one interesting aspect that's in Germany. I don't know whether they're in the English-speaking countries that's an equivalent. It's called the Engelmacher, which is a term, a little bit old-fashioned term for illegal abortions. Like in the times when it was illegal, there were women who were specialized on helping other women, more or less successful, to get rid of a pregnancy. And they are actually appearing in, and I have seen it a few times. They are actually appearing in a constellation as somebody who's doing this with the arms like this. They they look like this.
Oh, okay.
So that's interesting. So that's another case where you have lots of dead bodies, somebody responsible for lots of dead bodies.
Okay, thank
But
you.
yeah,
Yeah,
I've seen
Rosalie.
one of those, actually one of those constellations that you mentioned, that it was really intense, the constellation itself. But what happened is that the perpetrator, they weren't able to take responsibility of what they were doing. So what happens in that sense with the actual family, right? Because it was a family constellations, but we couldn't get. I remember it was actually quite intense to watch. I was part of that constellation as well. That the perpetrator, she couldn't acknowledge that she did something wrong.
Yeah, that's often with this mass.
Yeah,
That's very often that's this feeling of being in the right place, being rightfully. That is actually the energy behind a perpetrator with multiple responsible for lots of dead people. Um, so the healing movement is here. They don't need to, you know, forget about doing something wrong. The only thing that needs to happen is for the healing movement is that they are able to reconcile with the victims. So they need to be able to come together, right? That's the healing movement. Or, sometimes in the family constellation you can't achieve it. That's fine. You don't need to achieve it, but the healing movement is ignited because the dynamic itself is seen. So it's not necessarily, you know, again, it's not Hollywood with a good ending that you see in the constellation, the reconciliation, but you can trust the movement that's been ignited once the dynamic is shown. So that's kind of good enough sometimes. I don't remember that one, how far we went with the
No,
with
it was a very, I remember it was a very long constellation, and there was a lot of dead people, but the person who needed to acknowledge it was, we couldn't get it to do it. Actually, it was someone else from the family that ended up actually taking the place and just to actually make the move.
yeah. I
But
think
yeah,
I now remember actually. Yeah. So
it was a lot of dead people there, but we didn't know what was happening. Actually, she never, that was one of my friends, and she never knew, because her mom used to be like used to work in a hospital, and she used to be a nun in there, so we don't know. So yeah, we didn't know exactly what it was like, and she never actually had the actually had a chat with the mom, obviously, but
no, that's okay. You don't need to have that. But
yeah.
that is then when we're looking at the practical aspects of the work, that is what you have to be okay with. That's part of it, that you allow, you be sure, reassure yourself the movement has been ignited, the dynamic has been made visible. Now the souls will move beyond the constellation. This is why Bert Hellinger said the movement it takes up to 6 months to come to an end and also have an effect. So it can be anything from instantaneously relief to in 6 months, right? And it can be drastic and it can be subtle. Like everything is possible. The only thing that should not happen is no movement. Yeah. If you look at the chat room, I think Virna posted today a post. I don't know whether you saw that in the chat room, as she had an experience with like that, where there's no movement, which is fine. I mean, it was another trainee, so can't expect that to happen. But that's the only. So what I want to say is every movement that takes place is what you want to achieve, what you want to support, not a specific movement. Because you're not in control of that, right? It's a family system that is.
Mike, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
To take Roseo's point forward, maybe it's a premature question. If you're in a constellation and there are not enough people, it's a limited group, but you realize you need 7 generations or more people. What do you do? Is there a way around when there's a limited amount of people, but you need more representatives?
Yes, well, we definitely talk about that, but I can just say so much as you don't need people to represent everybody. You can use
yeah.
objects as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Cushions are your friends.
Hey, what was that?
Cushions, is it this one?
Cushions. Yeah. Cushions, definitely cushions, or chairs, or shoes, whatever you have. Whatever, you have to be inventive in this case. But also, you can also ask, your participants to swap roles. That's another possibility. So
Okay. Yeah.
they can represent multiple generations. Yeah, you can work with placeholders or floor anchors or something. Yeah, but I think, when do we say that? Probably in 4 and 5 we talk about that more.
Okay. Sure. Thank you, Maya.
Okay, right. Who has not said anything? Alexandra, how is it going?
Oh, hi. Yes, actually, after I found very hard and I felt very challenged after the first exercise. And you told me that I was projecting an unresolved issue with my own life. And well, I'm not saying that it's not happening, but after that, I really couldn't be present. I found very difficult to be present on the class. I mean, I took notes, but yeah, it was very difficult because I felt almost spot on. Yeah.
Okay. So thank goodness you have the recording, so you can rewatch them and you don't miss out on anything. And that would be something, Alessandra, that would be great. You work on that in a family constellation in one of the workshops that's coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm?
Yeah.
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 Hmm.
Sure, I will do. Yes.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever,
Yeah.
I don't know what it was, or we see, we don't know. We just, if you feel the call, it will come up definitely.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Nothing is coincidental. Everything, it's good as it is. It's just meant to be. It's what it is. Just accept. Try to practice what you preach, acknowledging what is. I always say that. Okay,
Of
start with
course. Yes.
yourself.
And yes, and also I know that when I feel vulnerable, I go to take care of myself. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Very
Yeah.
good.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Okay. Thank you for sharing.
Very
Mhm.
well. Thank you.
And Julie, I was about you.
Yeah, good. I don't really have much to share, but I what was sort of powerful for me was when you said it was guilt is artificially induced. I'd never thought of it sort of in that way before. It's quite yeah, so that was good. When I did the guilt session, I still feel like there was something there, so I still feel like I need to go back and maybe do that meditation again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course. Yes, you can do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
You can also, turn it into a constellation in one of our practice sessions or in one of the open workshops when we, so yeah, that's great if it does ignite something in you. That's exactly what the training is for. It's not here to convey. If it would be only to convey information, I would pre-record videos, as many do, and sell it online. That's not what we do. I want every one of you to go through your own process, because that is actually the value of the course, is that you're going through your own processes, and then it doesn't matter if you facilitate or not facilitate at the end or whatever you do. That's not the goal. It's to take this time to go through everything, which you otherwise can't do if you only do workshops, because this is the lack of knowledge, because the knowledge added to the experience makes it like, how can I say, a whole, that makes it whole, right? One without the other is not complete. Yeah, if you will.
And just a question, if people come, say, for their own trauma or their own, say, illness or whatever it might be, could they also come from a perspective of knowing that there was a missing person or a non-talked about death or something in the family that they knew about? Would they come from that perspective to do a family constellation, or is it more just about what they're going
Like
through?
you think,
in their life?
oh, they are curious I never heard of that, actually, now that you say that.
No, so I'll give
No.
you an example. Like,
Yeah.
I know my mum lost a brother. He was very young and it was very secretive. They didn't talk a lot about it.
Aha.
She
Okay.
thinks, and the mother made up some excuse that doesn't seem very plausible for the death. And so, yeah, I'm just wondering if that's something you would constellate, or would that come out if you were doing something, say, on an illness or something different?
So, as a rule, is you can only constellate your own issue, right? So, in this example, if you come to a constellation, Julie, and you have whatever, a disease or an emotional problem or anything, and in the constellation, the brother of your mother would show up as a missing piece, that's great. Yeah. But you cannot come to a constellation and constellate for your mother because you think she has a problem with her missing brother, right? That is not the right order, and the results would be not correct. There would be no correct results out of it. I was just thinking the other day, just to round that up with all this COVID since 2 years now, there is a video online of Sophie Hellinger when she was constellating about 2 years ago or 1.5 years ago, the beginnings of COVID when it was in China, with her group, the virus. And interestingly is you have now with all the knowledge when you know how this started, then you know how it is done correctly. It was not, oh, there is this virus, let's look at the virus, we are curious to see about the virus. It was, the question was, how can we as a group, Hellinger, Ciencia, the group who was there, what we can do, to deal with this virus. Is there anything we can do? So it was from the personal perspective of a group. So you can do that, right? Because the morphogenetic field is not only a family system, it's also covering a group consciousness, and this can also cover this group consciousness that is concerned with this virus, right? And then the results were very interesting, and it clearly showed that the virus is not going away, and it came up again, and that's what we see now with this new Delta virus. It was the representative for the virus. It was really coming up again. It really interesting to watch from now, what we now know from back when. If it would be this curiosity question of somebody, oh, let's just look at whatever would have been, you would have seen, would not have shown the real dynamic of the virus, right? Because you need this, you need to look at it from a perspective of a member of the morphogenetic field that you're looking at. Otherwise, it doesn't work. It's nothing for curious minds, if you will, if you understand what I mean.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I leave you with that, and I see you tomorrow, same time, same place. Have a good
Great.
night or
Have a good
day.
night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.
See you
Bye.
tomorrow.
See
Bye.
ya. Bye.